And
Okay.
let's go over to your light burn. And I think we've had a session, so we're going to record this one so you guys can refer back to it. Have you developed some more questions, or oh no, we're not going to do that wrap thing of 360, are we? I'll have to get Robert's help for
What?
that.
What?
Uh, um,
Oh, you mean for the? Oh, I finally got it to work. You answered one of my questions, but I don't know how I got it to work. But I
gotcha.
finally did.
Awesome. Yeah, I
But I
haven't.
do have a question about
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
that step rotation. Is that a one-time thing, or is it going to be different for different size steps and stuff,
Um,
or do you know?
Well, the way I understand it, it's the calculation that takes place on how far the motor moves with every pulse, and every motor is different.
Right.
Now, all of our motors are the same, that we put on our rotaries, so the numbers should be similar. But that's actually going to calculate what that's going to do is turn steps per rotation. It's going to, if you tell it it's, whatever, 4,400 steps uh, per rotation, then it can pulse 4,400 times and it should make a full rotation and come to back to where it was. So if it's off a little bit, or if you know, uh, any of the other settings are off a little bit, just a little bit can make a big difference the farther out you go, kind of like a clock. You don't notice it losing
Yeah.
time the first hour or first day or first week, but once you get out there a little bit, you can see, that it's not quite as accurate. And that's kind of the same way as you work with this imagery and as these designs and stuff.
Okay.
So
Well, I got doing, and I followed Robert's videos. What I do, and I just
yeah,
had trouble with the Y was it wanting to run sideways instead of the cup was turning, but it was like instead of going the nozzle staying right there and making my doing my counts on the cup, it was running long ways. The Y was,
oh, I see. It was
and I
engraving
don't.
in the Y direction.
Yeah, but I finally got it to do it, and I don't know what I done, but
Hmm.
I got it set now.
Yeah.
But I was just
Well,
curious. I
I,
mean, if I
I know that.
different type of
Well, see,
change.
yeah, and sometimes those settings will have to change. And then, have you seen the thing where you can do like a 2-inch square? You can output a 2-inch square, and you can do this without the rotary also. And then you can measure it like center line, center of the kerf all the way around, and measure it and see if it actually comes out 2-inch by 2-inch, for instance. And then if it doesn't, you can calibrate it right here. You can go into edit and go into your machine settings, and you can go to calibrate axis. And then here's your
Okay.
x-axis. So the way this would work is, let's forget the rotary for a minute. Let's say that we want to make sure our x, well, it's the same. So this is still critical. This is the step length right now that's set in the machine configuration. So let's say, for instance, you said I want a 2-inch square, and you outputted one, and so your requested distance would be 2 inches, right? Because it doesn't matter the unit here. You could do millimeters there or inches. This is one case where units don't matter because this is just a ratio. So, and then you put in the actual distance. So if it measured over, so let's say it measured 2.1 inches. Let's say the square that you wanted to be 2 inches was 2.1. Then you put in what you actually got, and it would calculate the new step length for you. Now, I'm not going to write that to the controller because we don't want to do
Right.
that. So I'm just going to
Okay.
cancel
We'll
out,
see.
hopefully. But it's the same way for the y-axis. You measure in the y direction. Now the rotary, that's going to be the u-axis. So you'd go back into calibrate axis, and then you would just pick u. And when you do that, that way you can also dial in your steps per rotation, because this is going to do the same thing, I think. So, for instance, if you requested, in the U direction, the direction the cup spins, if you requested that square to be 2 inches, same deal, and if it came out, to 1.98 inches, what you put in what you actually got, and it'll fix the step length for you, and then you write it to the controller. So you can calibrate your axes using this
Yeah.
tool right here. Um, and to dial it in so it's absolutely dead on. Now, where you measure the diameter of the cup matters. because I believe that stuff is taken into consideration uh, in how it, outputs to the rotary device. So when you're in rotary setup, now, one thing to mention, if you ever see any erratic behavior, especially if you use test or if you frame uh, from here, from the control pan, from Lightburn, uh, it'll mess up. Your y-axis will start moving, and the rotary won't turn, and lots of crazy stuff happens. And the reason is we use
That's
the.
what.
Hmm, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was originally doing the frame from uh, Lightburn,
Hmm.
and you and Chris put on there not to do that. So
Right. Yeah, and
yeah,
and it's
I got it to
because,
work.
yeah, some of our old lasers, the ones with the 5-pin rotary, and they had a switch on it. And about 99% of all the other Chinese lasers out there use the y-axis for the rotary, which means you have to unplug a connector where your y-axis goes and plug your rotary into there, or flip a switch, or turn the power off and change something. Whereas ours uses a different channel so that we don't have to take the y-axis out of play, and it's convenient because it allows these rotaries to be plug and play, and they're hot swappable, so you don't even have to turn the power to the machine off. You just plug it in and it says, oops, hey, there's a rotary, we're ready to go. So that's why those buttons don't work right, because those are for the other 99% of lasers and our older ones. So, this software has to be able to support all of them. So that's why some things act weird in here. It's not really a flaw. It's just the way it is. So,
When you back on the Facebook on the site there, I
mhm.
went started doing it on the machine, and I got it to do, and I got my steps for rotation, but I just wasn't clear on that.
Yeah,
Kind of thought
yeah,
because that mesh with gears and stuff in this machine, way I understood, and
yeah.
kind of what you explained there. So once that's it should, no matter what diameter
That
object I put in there, that steps per same, right?
the way I understand it, this should generally not have to change because it reflects an actual value of, the steps of the motor, and that typically doesn't change.
Right.
So yes,
Right.
now people do change this on wider diameter things, because as we were talking about before, the bigger it is, the easier it is to see even a minor variation that you wouldn't normally see. So that's why you may see them do a 4x4 square if they're going to do a really large image and want to stretch it way out and get the most out of the real estate. Then you might do a big item, and check your steps with it, with a big object to make sure. Um, but mine, I think, is around, and I think what we say is somewhere around 4,400 to 4,600. Um, and then your roller diameter, did you measure your O-rings on the drive wheels outside to outside to get that value?
And that's that value right there. Yes.
Okay. And then of course you can change either one of these. Now, uh, I
Yeah.
measure at the drive wheel because I think that's where that calculation for, the revolution of that cup, whatever the circumference is, I think that's where that takes place. Um, so if you measure on a different part, I would think that that would be off. Now, other people say to find the middle of where you want your work to be and use that diameter, or circumference, and either one of them. Uh, Diameter is easier to measure. I don't have a cloth tape usually hanging around, so um,
Uh,
that's
either
kind of how that works.
I
What's that?
done just, uh, I just used the caliber and done just like he did in the video
Yeah, yeah.
and
So
measured top, but
yeah.
I got it to work out. I
Okay.
may have to fine tune that.
So okay, awesome. Well, you
I
you worked through it and did a proof that you could get it done. So that's cool. That's cool. I need to try this sometime.
yeah,
I haven't done it. So
it was great. Yeah, I done the tape because the Yeti's all I had right now,
hmm,
and I just got the day, and I just want to get it set up. And
right.
really, before I talk to you, and that way, in case I couldn't, I might get some help. But
Gotcha. Gotcha.
you you don't like fooling with that.
So um Is there anything else that you
Acrylic,
were okay?
uh, acrylic. I seen something about you was talking on the webinar, I think, about acrylic because I'm really liking acrylic. I've done been making keychains and stuff, but
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of white. Have them take a toothbrush and clean them, and
Hmm.
they look good. I wash them and clean them, but you said something about doing something that would cut down on all that.
Yeah, especially on engraving. On cutting, if you're not worried about a flame polished edge, um, you know, a perfect flame polished edge, you could just crank the air up and that'll blow all that stuff out the bottom, you know. And usually when I'm cutting, like if I'm going to engrave and cut, I'll leave the paper masking on the bottom side and lay it on the honeycomb, and that gets rid of any of those reflections that always happen off the honeycomb instead of having to stand it up on magnets or something, you know, or chalk it up on a piece of wood. Um,
I
and
tried with with paper on both sides, and then I determined then that the paper on the top side needs to come off.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
left it on.
If you're engraving, I always find that soot and stuff gets into the engraving part and embeds itself, you know. So, yeah, I'll usually, if I'm going to do an engrave, if it's straight cut, I'll leave the paper on both sides. But if I'm on engrave, I'll leave the paper on the back side and peel the front. And it depends on what you want to do. If you know, you can 3D relief engrave in acrylic, especially thicker stuff. I've got some 3/4 I did one in. Um, you know, where you get some actual depth. Um, and acrylic is just an awesome medium to work with. It's uniform, it's consistent. The density is the same. You know, and it loves laser light. It loves, you know, 10,600 nanometer wavelength light. It absorbs it readily. So that's what makes it a good shield also. A lot of lasers have acrylic, you know, viewing windows instead of glass. Ours are glass so they won't melt. So
You any acrylic, or I mean, what I ordered off Amazon is just cast acrylic.
cast will give you a lot better engraving. Now, it's what I was going back to. It depends on what you're going to do. If you're going to do a photo, you typically want to just do a surface engrave. If you're doing edge lit, you know, where you light it up with the LED and one of the signs or one of the little table stands, you know, the little holders, then you don't need a very deep engraving. You just barely want to mark the surface. And you've got a Nova 35 and right?
Yes,
Eh,
100.
100 watt. Okay. So yeah, and you can dial down low enough where, you know, you can get some really precise dots and it's not as much resolution as you think. And I'm doing some experiments based on Russ Sadler's formula for photo engraving. And I'm doing the parts with the high res lens now. Um, and you'd be surprised at how fast the mirrors and gantry move back and forth affects the beam signature. So if you get too fast, your dots that you're trying to lay down, which is ultimately what you're doing when you're engraving, is putting dots down. They start looking like dashes. And if your focus is off or your line interval is too high, they overlap one another and it blows out all the detail. So, you know, people think, ooh, it's a high resolution. I'll put the HR head on there and set it up to 1800 dots per inch and get a perfect photo. And it ain't like that. So that's kind of what I'm going through right now. And if you want to dig into that and look at it, let me pull it up in your browser and I'll leave it open. And that way you can refer back to it if you want to, or make a bookmark or whatever you like. Um, but it's interesting stuff. You know,
Okay.
I know how the lasers work, and I know the theory behind how the laser is, you know, ionized and how, you know, how the tube works and that kind of thing. But um, this really opened my eyes to the way it messes with the output in a practical sense. Um, here's an intro, and here is some of the testing that I've done with the standard lens, and now I'm going to do the same thing with some notes from someone who's given us some feedback on this test, and then I have this testing to do now, the round two, but I have all of the files that I'm using.
That's
And what's
in acrylic there.
what's that?
Doing photos acrylic. That picture you got pulled up there, that's engraving in acrylic.
Um,
In
I
the photo.
I don't think this particular one is in acrylic, but the only difference
Oh,
is you invert it. That's the only difference between doing acrylic or anything else. Is that you just invert it. You want all the black dots white and all the white dots black, since it contrasts in white, when you burn it, whereas most other things turn dark when you burn them. Acrylic turns white, so you just invert the image.
okay. I made my wife self keep playing and
Hmm.
showing them at work. I keep wanting me to make them
Yeah,
keychains.
you you should watch this video. This one down here at the bottom. This is Russ Sadler's channel, one of them. And some of his videos, they're rabbit holes. Um, and he deep dives into the technical aspects of everything that's happening, like cutting acrylic. He's got some great videos on that, talking about beam drag, and getting rid of striations on the side, and how using more air is worse with acrylic typically than using too much. Now, I've been cleaning my cast acrylic, because I only use cast, with denatured alcohol for 5 years, and I've never heard of anybody saying, "Hey, this thing cracked or broke," because a lot of alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, any polar solvent like that, uh, will cause acrylic to craze and split and crack even later. Later on down the road, it'll just disintegrate. Um, but I've never had that happen, and I clean mine with the alcohol, with denatured alcohol. But a warm soapy water, with a little Dawn in it, and a soft bristle toothbrush is the best way. And then if I get any scratches, there's some stuff called, what is that stuff called? Opus? No, something like that. Uh, you can get it in a kit. I forgot what it's called. It
It's
comes in
something in the form.
Novus. There it is. This is awesome, awesome stuff. You could buff out some big scratches, in various metals. I mean, plastics. This is also good for your headlights. That the heavy scratch remover, you can clean your headlights straight up with that kit right there. But it's great for acrylics and everything else.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, a
now,
lot with acrylic because I
yeah.
it's easier cutting it than any of the wood and stuff that I've done so far.
Yeah, it is, and it's uniform. Once you get your settings, you can pretty much bet that that's going to work every time after that. At least that's what I've found working with, uh, especially synthetics, but specifically acrylic. Um, but it just seems to enjoy being hit with a laser beam. So, um, let's see.
Oh,
Do you want to look at a photo for a minute? And you're talking about doing acrylic. So or do you have any other questions or things you want to go over? Because we can go back to that, but I want to open up another thing while we're talking.
I'm with this. Charlie might have something he's interested in. I don't know.
I'm soaking it all up here. I don't really have anything, right.
I know one thing, and I don't know if you do it now, but you tried to get, if you recall, on our last session, you tried to get. I tell you, my brain ain't working since I had that COVID. uh, that other program, you tried to get it to work
Oh, the Corel,
with Corel, yeah.
the
Well, I tell you,
script. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
it worked. And you don't have to work on that now if you don't want to. You just we
Yeah,
talked about it.
we do need to do that, and I've got it set up on mine, and I probably just need to go through it again, actually. Um, Let me pull this back up for a
Yeah,
minute. So, whoops.
you could get yeah. I'm fine on this because
Okay.
I want to learn all I can. I didn't realize you could do a picture on it though, so
Yeah.
that's gonna be a plus.
So that's the difference between extruded and cast. See how much brighter white you
Oh
get.
yeah,
So, other than that, if you're just doing key change and they're just cutouts of letters and they don't have much engraving on them, it's extruded is perfect for that. It's actually a little more pliable, I think, than the cast.
My,
Um,
my
and then,
wife, want-
yeah,
she's wanting to cut that small earrings, and I don't know what kind would be good for that. And then she's wanting to put designs on it with her vinyl.
okay, okay, yeah, extruded would be fine for that, I would think. If you're not going to
Okay.
actually want a good engraving on, if you're not going to do a photo on it, you could use extruded for that, especially if you're gonna, apply
Oh, I'm
something
gonna.
else. So,
That's something that she's wanting to do
hmm
is
hmm
the earring things fitting, but it'll have to be thin for the earring. So is there a limit to how thin you can go with
uh,
it, or?
nah, People cut mylar, with these machines, and it's 7 mil or 5 mil, some of it. So, people cut paper, fabric, all kind of stuff with
You
these
can't
things.
make that, right?
What's that?
I think I read somewhere where you can't do vinyl, right?
No, you don't want to put vinyl in your laser. Anything with PVC in it. Um, I think I've got an article on it. Here's what it does to your machine over time. It makes it look like that.
Oh, well, I don't want that. Costs too much money for
Yeah.
that.
It creates acid when it hits moisture. As that gas, it's similar to cyanide gas, is emitted from it. So it's bad for you in a health standpoint. And it creates hydrochloric acid, I believe, or sulfuric acid, one of them. And it eats anything metal on your machine and just corrodes the crap out of it.
Yeah,
So,
I don't
and
want that. So
there's
that's
another
it.
example. Look at that. It looks like that's been out in a shed for 100 years.
Yeah.
So, now this was a question that somebody had about flashback, and this is how severe the flashback was. Um, Let me see if we can see the top. Okay, so that was the bottom, and they left the paper on it. But as the laser hit that honeycomb, it's actually a flat edge on the edge of the metal parts of the honeycomb. So the laser just reflects straight back up, and it burns a pit in there. If you got the power high enough, at the very least, it'll arc or leave a little mark on there that you got to wipe off, and you'll see a pattern to it. So that's one thing that I see about them cutting that acrylic. And they were asking about these striations right here, these vertical, lines that were showing up in it, and that looks like beam drag and too much air. And well, actually, on that side, that's because they cut it. You can see all the way through it. That's right, and that's where they cut it with a table saw.
What would cause beam drag? Too fast?
Too fast, not enough power, too thick, too much air. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I was incorrect about those striations. That was by the table saw that cut. That's a factory edge just showing through. There's nothing on that edge there that's facing us. Um, Now here's the bottom. There's those where it's reflecting off the honeycomb again in places. But do you see how the top part of it looks like it got cold too quick? It had
Yeah.
too much air blowing on it. So it was solidifying it before it could kind of flow back together and give you that flame polished edge. The reason the bottom looks better is because no air could get past here because it was all diffused coming down the hole, see, coming down that slot through the kerf. And there was very little air getting. This is why using an external air pump when you cut things for wood, especially, not so much acrylic, is beneficial because you can get your air all the way through. So not that none was
Yeah.
flowing, some was flowing, but a little bit of air is okay because if you'll notice that what you're seeing is the factory side on the other edge. So this is a perfectly flame polished edge here. You can even see how shiny it is even where it bounced back. So this is an evidence of too much air and possibly too much power. So you want to go slow and you want to use a little bit of air when you're cutting, just enough to knock the flames down. Because here's another thing that happens when you set this acrylic straight down on the honeycomb, it creates pockets underneath because you've closed it off. And as you're pushing those off gases of that acrylic, it's going back under the bed, and the exhaust is taking most of it, but some of it's hanging out under there and getting in those pockets, and they can flash over and catch fire and flare up. So you want to run max air, or as much as you can to eliminate any flare ups, and that's it. No more when you're cutting. It's not like
They'll
when you're
put
cutting wood, because when you're cutting wood, it's like blowing on the end of a lit match or something, or a burning stick. You can stoke it, and actually get it going. That acrylic doesn't work that way. So, but with ply and MDF, absolutely, the more air you give it, the better cut you're going to get.
yeah. Okay, because the keeps I've been making, I've been leaving the air on for cutting on
Hmm.
the up high.
Yeah. So on acrylic, you need to back your air down so that you can affect a good flame polished edge here. So, and that'll take a little bit of dialing in. Now, here's one that was on Facebook the other night, and she sent me the image. Well, actually, I used the one she posted, and this is on mirrored acrylic, I think. And she said it didn't come out good. Sometimes we can open this in a new tab, and it'll come open bigger. Yeah. Um, and it looks like there's some stuff hanging out in there, some little artifacts, and there's not a lot of contrast, inside the letters. Um, so what I did was took her file, and I ended up with this, which I think is pretty decent uh, as compared to the original. And what I did ultimately is lower my DPI because my beam can't get much smaller than this anyway. So if your beam can only get to whatever this beam width is, and you keep lowering your line interval, you're going over everything twice. So there's places that could get blown out, you know. So ultimately, what I did was slow down, slow and low when you're engraving acrylic, slow speed, low power. I do, and don't get too tight on your line interval. So.
So is there like I guess a set point kind of for the line, or
Well,
is it just
see,
something you play?
well, the line interval has a lot to do with, again, the spot size of your beam, or not even that. Actually, uh, it's the dot, the size of the dot that it outputs on whatever the material is that you're using. Now, there's a tool, and you might want to check this out. Let me see. On let's see. That tool is in the material test file. The Lightburn material test file. There's a link here, O2 Creative. And I might have taken you there before, but I want to look at specifically at the engrave interval generator for Lightburn. And you can actually output a test to find out what your interval needs to be, because here's what happens. And in Russ's video, he talks more in depth about this. But if your laser beam is this diameter and you set your interval too high, then you're overlapping your dots. And if you don't set it enough, you get lines in between because they're not touching. So the line interval is going to depend on your focus. It's going to depend on the material ultimately, because anodized aluminum is going to give you a sharper, more accurate representation of your beam signature than, say, a piece of balsa wood. You see what I mean? So there's no magic number. Um, Basically, this is where all this dialing in stuff comes into. Um, so using this generator, it will help you understand your line interval, and you can run this on, different focal lengths and different materials. Um, and there's a bunch of other tools in here too. There's a basic power test, and you might have seen those, where you can do a fill or a line and generate a power scale. Mhm. Go ahead.
I did. It's one that's in your support page. That's what got me messed up on my acrylic up a bunch of keychains because after I run this test, I
Mm.
couldn't get it to cut, and then I put that on the site, and you answered back and said make sure that my minimum power was same as and that's
Yeah.
what the problem was.
Yeah.
But
When
changed
you,
my-
yeah, when you open that material test file that we supplied, all of those layer settings stick. So then when you went to do your regular stuff, your minimum powers were set to 0 or 1 probably. But that's what's good about this page.
I got a bunch of them on there that I couldn't get to cut, and I was pulling my hair out, and I was mad. And
Yeah, I guess that was kind of my fault, but
no, it wasn't your fault.
so, but yeah, these tools on here help you understand about all that, and that interval test is a really neat way. If you don't want to do a deep dive, if you just want the cliff notes, you can generate some of these and actually see how it's going to look, and see if it's burning out your detail and stuff. Because this is ultimately what you want to end up with, is where they're all just barely touching one another. So.
Right. I know. I'll probably play with that. It gives me something to play with.
Sure.
Figure out.
Yeah,
Because
and he talks about this, like I said, in this very bottom video, that one,
can
and
you bookmark
mhm. I've got it
then
open. Yeah, I haven't bookmarked it, but I'm gonna leave it open for you. So,
Okay.
and or you could just go to the support site and search for Russ. And on his channel, man, if you're on his channel, if you like stuff like this, and I do, uh, go look at a few of these other ones. There's ones about beam. It talks about beam drag and all that when you're cutting acrylic and how to get a nice flame polished edge, and goes into some more detail like that document that I showed about diagnosing that flashback on the bottom side and all that and the too much air. And he goes into real detail on that because another reason acrylic is a great medium is you can see what it's doing. You can take a piece of 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch or even 3/8 and do a power scale line and actually see at what power the depth is going to be, and actually quantify that because you can see it. So it's a great, it is literally my favorite medium. So
What's the name of his site?
what's that?
The site for that Russ.
Oh, it's right here, and you can hold control and click, and I believe it'll open it in another window. Let's see. Yeah, and then this is on his channel, Sabar Multimedia, and he's got tons and tons and tons and tons. See, talking about how neat acrylic looks, you can actually see what the beam signature looks like as it drills into the acrylic. So he really dives into this stuff and talking about photos. I'm sorry.
Looks like that. A piece of a square piece of acrylic that it was in the back of the machine where the tube is.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like that.
Yeah.
I guess where they test fired it or something.
It was that was your keepsake. That's your beam signature of your machine. They test them all like that before they go out the door. Matter of fact, they keep records. We've got the full QC report, the checklist that they go through.
Yeah.
We keep the reverse compensation settings that we send out on that card in case the card is missing or lost. And we keep a picture of the sample engravings, and then we send some of that stuff to you. So.
Okay.
Trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, you've got an awesome handle on everything. And have you been playing with the camera much?
I'm using it on everything.
Yeah, I do too. I probably couldn't. It'd take me a minute to run a laser if it didn't have a camera on it.
Well, I think I struggle. If I use the camera, I can get it to put the image on the wood where I want it.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't, I just can't figure out the origin. I can't get the origin to set. I hit the origin button, but then when I hit frame, it goes plumb over off the wood and frames way over, and so
Yeah.
I struggle with that a little.
Part of that is it's probably since you have a camera hooked on here. what happened to your tabs again? Here they are. That's doing that crazy thing. So it looks like you're in user origin right now, but you got to watch out for the camera because if, for instance, if I were to update the overlay, it kicked me back into absolute coordinates here. And that will throw you off every time if you go to frame from here. Now with the rotary, you can't frame from here. But yeah, just on a regular job, if you frame from here,
He instructed to do that
mhm.
on the, and that's the only reason I had that changed. It's being on absolute coordinates.
Gotcha. Yeah, using the camera you do because literally wherever you drag it, that's where it's going to go. But yeah, on the user origin, for instance, if you wanted the top of that, to be like right in here, I would choose my job origin upper left, and then why is it not? Oh, because we've got rotary enabled. Nope. Turn that off. Oh, there we
I,
go. There we go. So that needs to
okay.
be off typically. Um, and then we don't want to frame the tool layer. So I'm going to turn that off. So now our job origin green box is attached to the artwork, right? So we can choose all the way around here. If I was going to lay that out on a tumbler, I'd pick center, and then I would just center the red dot, on the workspace. But since we're going to lay this on flat wood, I want to put that long line, and I know it's going to go off, but I want to put the corner of it like right about here, right? So I'm going to choose my job origin for upper left, and then I would take my head and move it to this spot right where the arrow is. Let me see if I can draw a little circle. Whoops, zooms backwards on this one. I still can't work this zoom. I'm just going to draw a little circle right here, and I'm going to make it a
And
tool
that's
layer. So imagine that with that material sitting where it's at, you just moved your red dot over to that little blue circle, right? And then hit the origin button. And let me get this back into view again.
but
So,
on the machine
well, yeah, right.
or on.
Yeah, on the machine. So here, this is how that would work. You'd move your red dot to right here because I want that rectangle to sit right here, right? So I would
Yeah.
move my red dot just right over here in this area, somewhere. I'll choose here and hit the origin button on the controller. And then when you go send this job over, it's going to put it. Nope, I don't want to draw another thing. I always forget to get out of that too. Control Z, escape. Now, there we go.
And I got the table down now because I had that rotor in there. I just
Well,
took
no,
it
you
out
don't have
so
to move
that piece
nothing.
of.
I'm just using this for a visual. You don't have to change anything. Um, but what's going to happen when you hit start? Let me get this a little closer so I can zoom in a little bit. Let's see. Okay. So here's my little dot. Why is it not? Oh, because I don't need to frame the tool thing. Okay. So this is where my red dot, just imagine I move my head over here and I hit the origin button. If I send this job right now, it's going to put it right here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because and I know it went off, but this is just so let's say for instance that your red dot after
That's
you
starting. Right?
what's that?
That'll be where it starts at, right?
Well, it may
Or
not. Well, no, that's where it's going to reference its cut from. It's where it's going to reference its origin. It may not start from
okay.
there, but it's going to reference its origin there. It may start
Okay.
on the other end of it, depending on how the motion planning is set up and how your optimization settings are. So this is just for placement. This is just to reference an origin, and you're setting that origin when you move your head wherever you move it, and wherever that red dot is, and you press the origin button, you just set the origin for that job. So then all you have left to do is figure out, which job origin you wanted. For instance, let's say that we wanted to put this rectangle. Do I have to? Yeah, I don't want to mess up what you got right here.
I've done that. I've done got my steps for that. That was doing them for that rotor. I'm done with that. So you can do whatever you want to.
Okay. Let me try to get back to where I can see the screen again. Let's just grab this sucker and make it where I can deal with it a little better. Something like that. This will be easier to see, I
You need,
believe. Whoops. Okay, so let me use pan, and then we can drag this sucker, I think, and then zoom in a little more. All right, so we're still under the assumption that you moved your red dot to this point right here and hit the origin button. And here's your artwork that you want to put there. If you have this radio button checked, it's going to put this green box in the upper left hand corner, which means when you send the job, it's going to put that green box right where you set your red dot. So it's going to do this. Now, if nothing changes except this, if you hit the send right now, it's going to do this. Does that make sense?
right,
So
yeah,
the key is, and that origin will never change unless you go over there and move it somewhere else and hit origin again. So that's important to
okay,
remember when you're in user origin. If you go over there and manually push that origin button, wherever the head is, that's your new origin until you change it again or until you revert back to absolute coordinates, in which case that is ignored.
okay. Now,
So,
let me ask you, the
mhm.
red reset button do on the machine, on the controller?
The reset, it'll basically do a soft reset instead of like unplugging it and plugging it back in. It'll rehome everything. It
Oh,
should rehome everything and get its origins again and make sure that everything's working. It'll go through and make sure all the sensors and things like that, does a self check, that kind of stuff right at the very
I
beginning.
just been trying, I accidentally hit it because I didn't know if it changed some factory settings or something that
No,
would mess it all up.
no, it wouldn't, but I'm not so sure that it may not move the Z axis. And if you had your rotary sitting in there and your head was hitting over the top of it, and it decided to move up for some reason, that might be a bad thing. So
Yeah,
it's a good
I've
idea
been trying.
to not leave your
I've been
fixture in place if you're not doing anything with it. So that way you're in, send your head back home at least, and that way it won't contact anything if the bed moves. So, and you can do that from within Lightburn. You can go over here to the move panel and you can send it home with the home button here. And there's one right here in the laser tab too. So,
yeah, I had that one,
yeah,
and it goes right back up to the upper corner there.
yeah, yeah. So,
I'm not sure if that's the back front how the orientation's supposed to be.
yeah, it is. That's the rear left. And not just because our device origin, which is this little red box up here, is always upper left, that doesn't necessarily mean it's home. Or what I mean is home is not always origin either. Ours happens to be the same. Our home position is the upper left, and our device origin is also upper left. Some machines, the origin is down here in the lower left, and it doesn't really matter to the end user, other than you have to get it right when you select your job origin. I mean, your device origin at the very beginning, initially when you set it up. Um, but that usually never changes, and ours just happen to be in the same place. But the green box is showing you where your job origin is, and the red box is your device origin, and it'll never change. So, and if you'll notice on absolute coordinates, your green box is up at 0, 0 also. And then as soon as we jump down to user origin, then that box will jump back over to your artwork. So now your new job origin is attached to your work. And then you just choose whether you want to, and it depends on, let me pull this back in. It depends on what you're doing. Um, like, I don't know why the zoom is backwards. If I wanted to put that square in the center of another square, I would choose my job origin to be the center, and I would move my red dot to the center of the bigger square, press the origin button, and then it'll center it right up. So
Okay,
if you want to center something, I would always use center origin. And this is what I use on rotary also, because all I have to do is eyeball it and make sure that it's centered up between the two painted, between the actual work area. So,
okay. Now, while you got that zoomed up, I'm gonna ask you a question about, you see where I've made the hole for the key ring
mm-hmm,
and any of how thick that is?
mm-hmm.
Is there any way to get, no matter how big I make the circle, whatever, when I when I cut it out, it still leaves that much plastic around it. Is there any way to get that thinner, or you know what I'm talking about?
Leaves. Um,
Like where there's not as much acrylic around the hole there. What I'm saying is it's hard to get a key ring on the deck because it's so thick. And no matter
oh,
how big, if I make the hole bigger, then it still puts that much.
I
I don't.
see what you mean. You don't want to get it too skinny or to just break off. Is that what you're?
Well, yeah, but it's most of them I've been making's too fat. I mean, too thick.
Okay,
I
and
have a
you
hard time
so you want to engrave them down where they're thinner?
just a little bit.
So yeah, you could do that. I mean, in your design, you could draw a circle right there around it, and then you'd figure out what depth that you want, and then just engrave that whole section off. You just have to go past it just a skosh, so you get a nice clean engraving. You wouldn't want to stop short; it'd leave an edge, it'd leave a ridge on the outside.
Okay.
But is that what you're after? Like wanting to engrave this down on one side so that you can get a key ring on it easier?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Um,
yeah. Just perhaps what size I make the hole for the key ring there when I don't know what you call that when you
are you
get
talking about
that to
the
make
distance between this inner diameter and the outer
right,
diameter?
right.
Now, okay, so you're talking about making that distance less, like making the inside hole bigger, for instance.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so
Because if I self bigger, then it still leaves the thick amount of acrylic around it. It just the hole gets bigger, but the acrylic don't get thinner right there.
Yeah, it compensates, I guess. Yeah, it adds more.
Yeah, I guess it compensates or whatever.
I'm not sure if I follow you actually. Can you pull up the file and show me? Do you
I
do you
can
have it?
pull one up. Let's see.
I just want to make sure that I'm on the same page with you.
What I need to do, just hit new, or just,
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
say for instance, this one made for, well, said it did. Where'd it go?
It's
There it
probably
is.
there. Okay. All right. So tell me what your end game is on this one again. Is to be able to make it easier to put the metal keychains on it, the key rings.
Yeah. See, when I make my circle, and
Uh-huh.
then I hit. You see my cursor?
Yeah, I can't. No, I can't. I can't see your cursor. If you select something, I can see it, but I can't see it moving around, pointing at anything.
If I select, well, I'm not, okay, where the little ruler is over here on the toolbar,
Okay.
right below it, that you hit, it makes the design around the word. You type in some words, and then
Uh-huh.
put your little circle, and then you hit that, and it puts
The offset. Mm-hmm.
the offset around it.
Mm-hmm. So is your end game to make the inside circle bigger?
Make
Without
the,
making the outside.
without making the outside bigger.
Okay. So you
Well,
can, yeah, I do see. And so I'm gonna select this and I'm gonna ungroup it if it is. Yeah.
and that, I what I opened up there, that ain't the keychain I made, but it for some reason it
Okay.
ain't got the words in it,
Well,
but that's still
yeah,
that's what I'm.
it'll be the same way. Now, if you'll notice, there's another set of little boxes up here. You see those?
Yeah.
That selects the object origin. And so since we want to keep that circle in the middle when we change what size it is, I want to select center because I want everything to calculate from the center of the circle. So as we make it bigger, it won't move over to the left or right. You see what I'm saying? It'll stay on the same axis, the same center point as we scale it.
Okay.
And then I'm going to lock that circle and you can just bring the size up or type in a size or whatever you need to do and get it whatever size you want it.
That's it right there. That's what I'm making. Learn something new every day.
Yeah, I thought that's what it was. That's why I wanted you to clarify because I didn't want to start engraving this thing and making it thinner the and thickness if we could do it that way. But yeah, if that's what you were after, that's exactly. Now here's how this can
Okay.
matter.
What?
I'm going to select the upper left for this one
And
now, and then watch what happens when I change the scale, I think. Yeah, see how it offsets it? So that's why object
yeah,
origin is important. So I'll control Z a couple times and get it back where it was. There we go. And that may be more exaggerated than you want, but you get the idea. You can once you select ungroup everything and select the object, make sure you're on center for your object origin. Then you can type in values. You can unlock the proportions if you want to, and enter the height and width individually. Which in this case you wanted a perfect circle, so you just change one. So 0.25, whatever.
yeah, I need to quit worrying about messing stuff up and play with a little more stuff.
Yeah, it auto
I
saves every 2 minutes. So
if I get everything out of whack, I won't be able to get it back.
yeah, well, you can hit Control Z or use this undo right here, and go back all the way. Watch, we can go all the way back to the beginning probably. I can just keep hitting Control Z and go back as many steps as we need to get to the original, all the way back to the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think you can redo, maybe not. It's not lit up. Okay, it didn't remember it the other way. Once you undo, I don't see the redo. But anyway, that put us back where we was. But I'll just recap since we're back here. In order to change just that one object on the inside, you'll have to ungroup it if it's grouped with other things.
Right.
And then I'm going to select outside to get away from everything. And then I'm going to select this circle. I'm going to make sure that the object origin is going to be center. And then you can basically just put in whatever value you want, 0.28 maybe, for instance, or 0.3 or whatever. But that's ideally how you'd probably want to do it.
Yeah. And that's what I was after right there.
Cool, cool.
Now,
You know what? We covered some really cool stuff in here. Would you care? And there may be a section or two, and if you want, I'll go through and redact it because I think there was a couple of frames where your email page was open on your Internet Explorer, and I can go in and edit all of that stuff out. If I did that, would you mind if I use this to put in an article? I think people could get something off this one. We covered some really good stuff.
yeah, that'd be fine.
You know, I'll block out anything, you know, I'll keep it white labeled. So
Yeah, that'd be fine.
awesome.
You use whatever you
Sure.
help me a lot.
Yeah.
Any way I can,
And-
which I'm sure I can help you much.
Yeah.
But
And that way you can just go to our knowledge base and get to your video whenever you want to look over it again. And we'll put it in our library for you.
okay.
So, do you have any other questions or anything that you want to cover?
No, just, with the other program.
Yeah. Okay.
Draw.
Yeah. Let me
you brought-
make a note to work on that. And actually, we probably ought to just set up a 30-minute remote thing. If
Yeah.
you just want to schedule one, I'll run in there and give it another stab, and we'll get it. We'll just focus on that and we'll get it knocked out. But I should be able to make it work.
Yeah, we can do that. I don't want to burn up your time.
So-
I mean,
That's what I'm here for, man. So,
another question for
Yeah.
you though. Have you got your diode laser yet?
oh, the fiber? No, I've got my spot cleared off for it though. That's gonna be. I hear they're hard to run, a little harder than most, but hopefully I'll get the hang of it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So.
'Cause that's something I'm interested in too, but I don't need no harder to run.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's more the dialing in stuff, and the MOPA is even more complicated because you can get different colors out of it. So, you know, so I'm sure that's a couple more rabbit holes in themselves. But anyway, but that's all I can think of. I mean, you guys are kicking butt on this thing, so. But if you have any other questions, if you want to get on there and set up that 30-minute thing, we'll do that Corel, get that Corel thing working. And then if you have any other questions, we can slip those in there too, or you can shoot us an email. And your son's welcome to email support@thunderlaserusa.com if he's got any questions. He's an operator, so he's got just as much access to us as you do. So anytime.
All right.
So
Well, I sure appreciate you.
absolutely. And I hope you have a good rest of the evening.
You too.
All right. Talk to you later.
Enjoy it.